Hello and welcome. Today we are going to be reviewing Adam Neely's analysis of Lady Gaga's arrangement of the Star-Spangled Banner that she sung at the inauguration earlier this year. So let's go ahead and dive right on in. I'm Dr. Zach. Grab a cup of tea and join me.
All right, so yesterday at Joe Biden's inauguration, Lady Gaga debuted the mixed meter version of this Star-Spangled Banner. Why was she using a mixed meter arrangement? You normally associate mixed meters with like math rock, not like presidential inaugurations, which are supposed to be really stately. Why?
Okay, so right there. I don't know why he chose math rock to be the mixed meter kind of example, because one thing that math rock has was mixed meters, but it also has this big focus on metric modulation. I think this is where he might have gotten a little confused there, because metric modulation has to deal with like changing rhythms to get to different tempos or different meters or whatever, but it doesn't strictly just have to do with like a meter change. And we see meter change in a lot of even popular tunes, such as like I Love Rock and Roll, Hey Ya has a meter change. And yes, this arrangement does make more significant use of the meter changes in those songs, but just to pull out math rock, it's kind of like saying math rock has meter changes, and guess what? The ocean has blue. Well, the ocean has a lot more than just blue to it, right? And math rock has a lot more than just mixed meter. So I think that was kind of a poor analogy on his part.
So we start out here in 4/4, and there's a long history of the song being rendered in 4/4 versus 3/4. John Philip Sousa actually did an arrangement of the Star-Spangled Banner back in 1918 in 4/4. And you know, Marvin Gaye, Jennifer Hudson, Whitney Houston, they all did it in 4/4 because it's a great way of taking the Star-Spangled Banner and appropriating it in popular styles. But here,
okay, so I like that bit because I actually didn't know that historical bit of taking the traditionally 3/4 Star-Spangled Banner and making it a 4/4 song for the pop style. The problem I have with this is that he says appropriating it for the pop style, and I think that's just a buzzword that, you know, has gotten in everyone's heads and isn't actually what he means. I tried to figure out, I was like, maybe he meant like apportioned it because you like take a part of it and you're changing some other part. And I was like, no, I think really what he means is transforming. You take the tune and you're transforming it to fit a pop style. You're arranging it to fit a pop style. You know, saying something like this artist has appropriated Black culture, that's a correct use of the word appropriating. Saying the artist appropriated the Star-Spangled Banner for this pop style, right? That doesn't really fit. So here I think that was just a buzzword kind of thing that doesn't actually mean what he wants it to mean.
but in context, it sounds kind of strange, almost kind of jarring, in fact. And the reason for that is because she is singing a syncopation. She's anticipating that second note.
So since we didn't hear the recording, what so proudly we, that's what we get there, instead of proudly we, like we would expect from the traditional version.
No, that rhythm of 3/8 notes plus 3/8 notes plus 2/8 notes is called a tresillo rhythm. It's very common in many kinds of dance styles around the world, but in this particular context, it sticks out a little bit. And it's so subtle and it's so simple, but it's so effective. It really kind of draws your attention in. It makes you think like, wait, what was that? There's also this really nice moment where she's singing the word hailed on the note F, and the D flat 7 sus4 in the harmony kind of almost contradicts it. Got that dissonance between the G flat, the sus4 of the D flat 7 sus4, but it's so subtle and so soft in the orchestration that your ear doesn't really notice it. It's kind of more of a, like this color. It's nice, very soft.
So that right there, he mentions this moment of dissonance, which is really subtle and really effective and really nice. And I think this actually kind of goes against the points he tried to make in his TikTok and dissonance video, where he talked about how like TikTok and dissonance don't mix because when you hear two people singing dissonant things, like it clashes and people immediately get upset over it. But here he's saying like this dissonance is really nice, and maybe people did get more upset about this than I realized because I didn't follow a lot of the discourse around this when it happened. But yeah, that like dissonances can be really effective and really nice when used appropriately. And in like the case of the TikTok video, I think it was more of a color difference between the voices rather than the dissonance itself. So he also mentioned this tresillo rhythm, which I didn't know a whole lot about, so I kind of looked it up. And even someone in the comments here said that it's basically just a triplet. And that form of a triplet can kind of be morphed into what he said with this 3/8 note, 3/8 note, 2. So we have this ba, ba, ba. Or at a quicker rhythm, da, 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 right? So we have those 3 da, da, da sounds to make up the 3 rhythm, right, that this is. I think that he's just kind of using this term to use the term. I mean, there's another term where we get kind of this like feeling of a different pulse for a second called hemiola that you might be able to use, but usually with like a hemiola, it's a little bit longer period of time that you feel like you're in a different meter. I don't know. I think like this dotted quarter kind of length, that is something that happens in 3/4 sometimes, because to confuse it kind of with 6/8. And so it might just be the composer playing around with that. The key point here is he says that we are anticipating the third beat, which is true. But like I said, in the melody, it's usually what's a 1, 2, 3, and. So it comes in on the and of 3. And here we're coming now on the and of 2. That's a whole beat earlier. So we're really like changing the fundamental rhythm of the melody here. It's not just like anticipating the third beat like he's saying. And even as he said, this is something that's oftentimes seen in dance kind of contexts. So I think this is actually the wrong context to be using this term. Even though he pointed out like, oh, it's odd to hear it in this context, I think it's odd to use that term in this context. So
the beginning of the, I guess, the second line is a reharmonization. We have slightly different chords, but the melody is the same. We start on the 6, the relative minor in the key of D flat, followed by G flat over D flat, the 1 chord over its 5th, and then followed by this really nice chord, a G flat over C flat. And I love the sound of this chord. This is the first, like, jazz chord that we have so far. It's a chord which, there's so much power to it. I'm pretty sure that this chord, the tonic triad over the 4 in the key, which kind of sounds like a C flat major 7 without its third, it's very nice, is a nod to John Clayton's arrangement of Whitney Houston singing the Star Spangled Banner.
Okay, so it may well be a nod to that arrangement. However, there's some things that I wanted to point out here. There's no such thing as a jazz chord. And in fact, right, we could explain that chord in terms of kind of classical Western harmonic theory. Now, there are chords that you find more often in jazz, so you can kind of put them in like a jazz category, but like just to call something a jazz chord didn't really sit right with me. So if we looked at the voice leading here, we see that it goes E flat, so that's E flat in the bass, and then this D flat here, it steps down to D flat, and then it steps down to C flat, and then it steps again down to B flat. So we could call this C flat a passing tone in kind of traditional theory, and that would explain it. There's no like jazz kind of chord quality about it. Yes, it does come across that way when you are listening to it. And he said like, oh, well, it sounds so powerful. The reason it sounds so powerful is because there's all that tension inside that chord, right? We have that passing tone, which is a tone that's outside of the chord, that's moving from D flat to B flat. And that kind of tension has a lot of power to it. And then we finally get the resolution there. So just a little bit more explanation of why this actually works. He also mentions that it's like a C flat 7 over with the third omitted and all that. And I just think that's an over-analyzation of it. I mean, you could say that a 5/7 chord, you know, if we have a 5 chord, that's basically a 5/7 chord with the 7th omitted. It's like, but so then it's just a 5 chord, right? I think just call it what it is rather than trying to extrapolate it out into this like other thing that is omitting the third. Yes, we can omit tones sometime, but in this case, I think it's just like an over analysis of it.
Temporary styles in 4/4. In this case, we have lots of the basic triads, but also a lot of great voice leading between chords with inversions. So we have this G flat over B flat going to a C flat diminished chord, which resolves very, very nicely to a G flat over D flat, the 1 chord over its 5th, which then goes very nicely to a B flat over D. Just such a beautiful progression. which would presumably resolve to E flat minor. It's, I guess, what you might call churchy. I don't know, I just get a church vibe to it, a gospel vibe to it. It's nice.
The reason is because this kind of voice leading where the bass is moving really smoothly by step is really common in Bach's era. And a lot of the traditional hymn settings are set to that same kind of like Bach 4-part style. And in fact, what he just played there, da, 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 his truth is marching on. Well, you know, that, like, you get that kind of vibe with how he just voiced those chords and played the resolution. So yeah, this churchy vibe makes a lot of sense. It's because of the style of voice leading that's happening here. That's why it works. Also, like, he points out a couple of times, oh, this is the only chord that's over its fifth, but he never like gives a reason why that's important. He's doing this thing where he's pointing out a fact, but he's not telling us how it's relevant to the actual analysis, which I also have a problem with.
Sounds like she's singing the word glare for a very, very long time. And the reason for that is because she starts singing as if it's in 3/4. Even though the rest of the band is in 4/4, she starts arriving on the note glare one beat earlier than where she has been finishing her phrases. Glare appears on beat 4, and to me it has that same kind of off-kilter feeling that the Tresillo rhythm had earlier on in the arrangement. It's very intentional. The rest of the band has this harmonization and this harmonic rhythm which supports the arrival of glare on beat 4. We got G flat, A flat minor, B flat minor 7 flat 5, E flat 7 flat 9 sharp.
Okay, I'm gonna pause here while he figures that chord out. So there's a couple of things that are problematic with this. Let's back it up so we can see the music. He says the Tresillo rhythm again, right? And I just think Tresillo is not what he means here. I mean, we don't have the Tresillo rhythm at all, but he's like, it's kind of calling back to that Tresillo rhythm. It's an anticipation, right? It's an anticipation. And yes, Tresillo has that kind of anticipatory element to it, right? Ba, 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 right? Just right before the beat. But just because the Tresillo has that anticipation doesn't mean that every anticipation has evolved from the Tresillo rhythm, right? I just think this is the wrong context for that term, and he keeps on using it. So here also, I disagree that this part is in 4/4. I actually think we switch meters here. And it's even supported by his analysis. He goes, oh, the band does a lot to really land on that beat 4. And it's kind of like, well, in the style that we've had so far, having a big 4 isn't really part of this style. So I think here it's actually supposed to be in 3. And the rocket's red, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 1. Okay, so what I did there is we had a bar of 3, a bar of 3, and then 1 bar of 2. I think that's how this is supposed to be broken up. 3 and 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2 and 1, 2, 3, 1. It fits, okay? It fits in 4/4 as well, but you hear the accompaniment, right? Like he said, it lands on that beat 4 in his transcription, and it goes bum ba da 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 and da da da, right? So that's what the accompaniment is doing, which gives that big feeling of having a downbeat actually on this beat 3 that he has in the second bar. So I think that this is actually 2 bars of 3/4 with a bar of 2/4 to start getting back into that 3/4 kind of feeling.
3/4 now. She is phrasing it in groups of 2. So the groupings are over the bar line. There's still this feeling of like being unmoored, this feeling of wanting to get to the next place because the meter has been played with, has been toyed with so much up until this point. And yeah, to me, it's kind of an affecting moment. For some people, these dramatic pauses that go against perception of meter might feel awkward or cringe. And I understand that, but I think it's because Lady Gaga is affecting more of a Broadway aesthetic than a pop R&B aesthetic that we typically expect with soloist performers of the Star-Spangled Banner at major events.
Okay, so he mentioned that there are those pauses there, and they're grouped in 2. So remember when I said before, I think we had that 1, 2, 4 bar? That then supports having this kind of group of 2 here, right? That then creates this kind of common motive, right? A rhythmic or a metrical kind of motive that then carries out through the piece. We are in 3/4 here, but we just have this idea, kind of like I said, of like a hemiola, of hearing a different meter in there. He also mentions at one point that some people found this to be kind of cringy to hear these pauses, or like people thought it was a mistake. I think some people in the comments kind of wrote that they thought it sounded like a mistake. But really, the key difference here is this is a performance that is not meant to be sung along to. This is a performance that is taking some artistic liberties with the national anthem, right? So if you just approach it that way and are just listening to it and are looking for that kind of variety and changes that the artist is adding, then it becomes really interesting. Not to mention, she's gesturing at the flags, which are representing victims of the coronavirus. And so this, I think, is a very intentional move by the arranger to give that kind of moment to pause and have time for that space, right? To gesture, have the camera pan, that sort of thing. So I really think that this bit here, while it does fit with that 2/4 from earlier, it's also functional, right? This is functional for as part of the kind of theater of this moment, of having all these different parts and pieces come together.
Really into 3/4 territory. We're picking up the phrasing. The mixed meter now has the effect of making everything feel a lot faster than it was before, even though the tempo has stayed exactly the same. There's like a lot more forward momentum here. It's telling a story. The harmony and the orchestration support this forward momentum by having a new chord on every beat. Like we got, oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave? There's just like a lot of harmony coming at you too. So we started in 4/4, we transitioned to 3/4, and now the meters are gonna get a little bit more loose.
Okay, so this makes a lot of sense, because if we were to have that kind of motion at the beginning and then we kind of let things stretch out at the end, for this tune, it would sound like it dragged, sound like we were, you know, kind of falling apart. But by increasing the motion towards our kind of climax here at Over the Land of the Free, right? This is that big moment in the piece. People usually start clapping and cheering. It makes sense to move that along. It's just a basic compositional technique. Also, if you notice here in the music, we have another 2/4 bar. Again, supporting my analysis that it's actually 2/4 earlier in the piece with some 3/4 bars. So, you know, this just goes back to say, like, good composers reuse elements, even if it's something as simple as like a 2/4 bar. It makes sense that we had it here, we have it a little bit earlier, and then where he had 2 4/4 bars, I think that would have been an opportunity to re-notate it to have a 2/4 bar in there. And I think is probably what the actual arrangement looks like, if I had to guess.
First, she doesn't sing the high note on the word free. She doesn't go up to the higher octave, which is what so many singers typically do. She did it in the 2016 Super Bowl. But she didn't do it here, and I think it was very intentional. Also very interesting on the word land, it sounds like she runs out of breath. She breaks up the word land into land and. But the orchestration also pauses at the exact moment where it sounds like she runs out of breath. So that was definitely an intentional call there. A strange choice, but too much of a choice for it to be an accident. Anyway.
Okay, and that's all the explanation he gives. A strange choice, but too much of a choice to not be just like an accident. But it's like, what does this mean? Can we talk about it? Can you give me something, you know, of why this is maybe the case? So here's what I think. Here's the music here. You can see he added in this rest for where she breaks, and he said the orchestration also breaks. Right here, it's really common to have a ritardando, or a slowing down, right? For the land of the free. So I think the reason she takes this break here is a functional reason of using her breath to cue the ritardando. This is something that happens a lot. With conductors, you're taught to breathe, to help cue people in, you know, and as a section, you're supposed to be breathing together. So I think the whole reason this happened is because it's that functional, like, trying to get everyone on the same page. If you listen to it, they don't quite get there. But I think that's why she was so intentional with it, is because this probably was a problem in rehearsal. And so she was going, land of the free. Okay, and that brings me to the next thing. He mentioned that people usually go up the octave. Well, first of all, it's not an octave. Free goes up to there, right? That's the tonic. It goes from scale degree 5 to scale degree 1, which is the here comes the bride, perfect fourth for any of you learning your intervals out there. But that's not what happens here, and I think the reason is how this melody is written. For the land of the free. Okay, I disagree with his analysis here that this note is a D flat. That would sound like of the free, but she sings of the free. So she goes back up to that E flat. We have an E flat here at the beginning of this line, and she goes back up to the E flat there. So by having both of those E flats, now it feels like we're settling on D flat. It feels like we've arrived on that D flat on free. For the land of the free. Versus the way that this is traditionally sung, where you start low and you're kind of like rocketing up to that free. O'er the land of the free, right? And then you want to like rock it up to that tonic note. So then that sounds more like the arrival. Instead of coming to the scale degree 5, which doesn't really feel like we've landed somewhere, people want to continue going. But by how this melody is written, it does sound like we land there because we have that E flat that then settles us into the D flat as a resting point. So yeah, overall, just kind of disappointed that he just like pointed it out, but didn't try to give any reason for why these things occurred. Just give me something, right? Give me something that I could work with.
She's singing it as if it's in 3/4. It almost sounds like she's rushing of the, but the rest of the band is playing it in 4/4. And I'm not sure if this is a choice or not, but she is singing and arriving on the note the a full beat before the rest of the band does.
Okay, so we have a 2/4 again here, right? Mentioned we have a lot of these 2/4 bars, so again, more evidence that I think my transcription is a little bit more accurate. And then she has here, and the home of the... So what I actually think is happening here is a 2/4, a 3/4, and then a 4/4. Which, if that's the case, it actually kind of nicely sums up what's happened so far in this piece. We've had the 4/4, then we had those kind of intermixing of 3/4 and 2/4, then we had kind of the stuff that's solidly in 3/4 with a couple of 2/4 bars thrown in, and then this, with a 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, would be like a kind of a summary of the whole piece. So this is how it would work. 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3. And 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we would have a downbeat here where he has the rest. And in fact, I can show you kind of what that would sound like. And I think it even fits better with how the recording sounds. So again, 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3. And 1, 2, 3, 4. Brave. Then Brave comes in there. And this whole thing about how the resolution happens after she lands on the, again, it's an anticipation. We've had that theme before in this arrangement where she's anticipating all these moments. Notice how he used the tresillo rhythm as an example of anticipation. And when she anticipated earlier, he brought it up. But when she's anticipating here, where he's saying that it's early, he doesn't use it. Well, that's because I think the tresillo rhythm is not the correct term for this. Anticipation is the correct term. The motive or the idea of anticipation is constantly used in this piece and well, not constantly. The idea of anticipation is used kind of throughout this piece in different places, right? And there's probably some more like structural significance that we could look into if we analyze this a bit more. But nonetheless, and it's anticipation that's important. So let's see how this kind of fits with how she sings it. So it's going to start right on. And the home. So get ready for that 2 and 1. We're going to do a bar 3, then a bar 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. It fits. Yeah, let's try that again. So she started right on home, which will be our bar of 3/4. So let's try that.
A full beat before the rest of the band does. Listen to it.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. So 2/4 to get that pickup in the home. There's a bar 3/4 and 4/4. Fits perfectly. Like, we don't need those 2 bars of 4/4 because we're slowing down. So it's like that 3/4 plus a 4/4 is taking up the 2 kind of full length 4/4 bars in and of itself.
Super interesting how Lady Gaga approached using mixed meters alongside her musical director, Michael Bearden. She really told a story. We started in 4/4 with this very strong, stately, regal arrangement. And then with these very subtle twists, even still within 4/4, we got this off-kilter feeling, we got this uneasy feeling, we got this kind of awkward feeling, but also exciting feeling that told us that we were going to someplace new. We didn't know exactly where, but it kept us on the edge of our seats. You know, this was very well thought out by everybody involved. The meters served to tell a story and to tell a new story. And I think that's important for us when we're listening to the United States National Anthem. We've been hearing the same story over and over again. And I think what's so interesting about the Star-Spangled Banner is that for Americans, we need to hear our story spoken by an individual who, at big events like the inauguration or the Super Bowl, serves as kind of an avatar for everything that we might be feeling. And there's this like lightning rod that surrounds the individual as they are singing it. Anyway, so the point is, I like the arrangement. It was cool. There's a lot of cool little things in there. Thanks guys so much.
Okay, so I just wanted to close with this because he has this really romantic notion of the artist, right? The artist is the avatar for the whole country speaking in this kind of lightning rod moment. Like, yes, the choices are important here, right? Like, the reason we're talking about this arrangement at the inauguration and not really talking about like her Super Bowl performance is because this was an important event, because they wanted to acknowledge the deaths from the coronavirus, right? And the music arrangement helped to give that space to acknowledge that moment. But it's, I think, a little bit over romanticized, you know, being that like, oh, it's just, you know, that the artist embodying all of humanity. And it's kind of like, yeah, well, you know, there's a bit of that in there. It's kind of like a yes, but. So I think that was just a little bit too over the top for me. Yes, it is an important moment. Yes, the choices do matter. But as far as like, you know, acting as a lightning rod for the whole country, I mean, I actually had not heard this arrangement until I was reviewing this video, you know, and I don't think one artist speaks for everybody in America. I think that's a poor viewpoint if he truly believes that, because there's such a, you know, diverse group of people in the United States that we need to be hearing from all different types of voices, not just relying on one voice at one event, that being a presidential inauguration. To be speaking for all of America. May have really spoke to him, which is great, but again, like that centeredness on your experience shouldn't determine the experience of the whole country. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. I actually really do like Adam Neely. I'm being very picky with him on these videos because he has such a wide audience and he just like gets some things incorrect. And, you know, I have to give him credit that, like, he's really made people excited about music theory, and there's, like, a lot of great information in his videos. But I think he just kind of misses the mark on some things, which is why it makes such great, like, review material. So we can discuss what he's kind of missing from the video, fill in the gaps of the knowledge that he leaves out. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.